Hello and welcome back. Today we're reacting to some more Oversimplified. Today we got the Cold War Part 1. Let's dive right in.
The year is 1917.
1917.
Fighting rages on the Eastern Front of the First World War. Both Germany and Russia are on the brink of collapse. Soldier, I need you to bring me this man.
Okay.
Got it. Found him, sir.
Who's that?
No, not Lenin. Lenin, the Russian communist. What?
Lenin.
Why would I need a beetle? Lenin, the Russian communist. He was exiled to Switzerland. You know what? I'll do it myself.
Okay. What are we doing now? We're looking for the Beatles?
Who wants to start a revolution?
And thus communism was born again. Oh yeah, he was the one with the really cool propaganda posters, right? That were in that like art style.
The Germans put Lenin on a train and sent him all the way back to Russia, hoping he and his mates would create an internal crisis. And create an internal crisis they did.
Can you imagine being so messed up that a government decides to send you into another country, knowing that your shenanigans are so crazy that you're going to disrupt that country?
The government was overthrown, and Lenin was in charge. He immediately pulled out of the First World War, made the country communist, started a 3-year-long civil war, got shot, broke the economy, caused a famine, and then he died. On his deathbed he said, "Hey man, tell whoever's in charge of giving people jobs not to let that jerk Stalin become the next leader. By the way, who did I put in charge of giving people jobs? That would be Stalin, sir."
Well, that worked
Stalin
out.
was a rising force in the Communist Party.
Stalin.
Opponents,
Is it Stalin
all of them were
or
arrested
Stalin?
or disappeared. So that was lucky. And so Stalin took over. He implemented his 5-year plans, which transformed the country from an agriculture-based economy to an industrial one. And like Lenin before him, he reigned with terror. Anyone who dared criticize or oppose him would either be killed or left to rot in the horrendous Soviet work camps. Then a short man with a silly mustache tried to take over the world, punched the Russians all the way to Moscow, and then the Russians, with some help from their faithful ally, the Winter, punched them all the way back to Berlin. At
Mother Nature's on our side.
America, the UK, and the Soviet Union were good chums.
God, this animation!
Near the end of the war to decide what would happen next. Hey Stalin, after all your trials and tribulation, you must be pretty happy to be standing here in Berlin. Tsar Alexander made it all the way to Paris. Hey,
I get it.
Just give me a second. Hey man, I think something's up with Stalin. I know, right? What should we do? Shall I tell him about the bomb?
Churchill.
Yeah, tell him about the bomb. That will scare
looks
him.
really weird in this.
So we got this crazy new big A-bomb that can destroy an entire city in one go. Yes, my spies told me already. Oh wait, I meant to act surprised. Wow, that's amazing. He already knew. How? Am I sure I want to send nuclear secrets via unsecure public coffee shop Wi-Fi? Am I ever? Dude,
it's just like modern day security.
And speaking of VPNs, if, like me, you take
no.
internet safety seriously, then you need NordVPN.
NordVPN. Oh my God, the hat!
Intruders, preventing anyone from stealing your personal data and stopping your service providers selling
These guys
your data
earned their keep with this ad.
5,000 servers in 62
We're still
countries,
skipping it.
You can pick territory entry with
Oh my God.
NordVPN.com/oversimplified to get an amazing limited time. So again, that's NordVPN.com/oversimplified.
Support them if you're gonna buy it. You might as well.
In the description box
I mean,
below.
the guy award
Now,
is a
where were
hat. He deserves it.
Oh yeah. Does the A stand for atomic or ass? Then America dropped their big A-bomb on Japan, and World War II officially came to an end. Hooray, we won. Okay, so now it's time to establish the New World Order. Stalin, you're in charge of Eastern Europe. Now, we want you to let them all hold elections. Oh yes, of course. Elections. And these elections will be free and fair, right? Oh yes, certainly. Free and fair. Definitely
free and fair.
Communist,
definitely
communist,
not
communist,
influenced by me.
If that's not free and fair, I don't know what is. Throughout Eastern Europe, Soviet puppet governments were established as a buffer zone between the USSR and the West, with Churchill proclaiming an Iron Curtain had descended across the continent.
Yep, the good old Iron Curtain.
Old allies was deteriorating fast. Over the next few years, the British intervened in the Greek Civil War to prevent a communist takeover. In Turkey, the Russians began demanding more control of Turkey's sea access routes, which prompted the US to send their largest battleship to Turkey for a friendly visit. After World War II, Iran was now occupied by both the
Turkey
Soviets
wants a
and
brand
the
new
British, with an
Turkey.
agreement to both pull out once the war was over. The British pulled out. Stalin was like, you know what? I think I might stick around. All in favor of kicking Russia out of Iran? You want to know something? You guys suck. Pressure from the UN forced the Soviets to leave, and with the establishment of NATO, the Soviets had no doubt that the West was out to encircle and destroy them. And America announced the Truman Doctrine, in which they basically said, those guys are not cool, cannot be trusted, and we will do everything we can to prevent the spread of communism around the world.
This has a lot of answers and implications in some of the modern day things happening over in that part of the world, with Ukraine specifically. And, you know, Ukraine is one of those border states, if you will. And Ukraine wanting to join NATO, just from a Russian perspective, right? We got to put both hats on here and think of this from all sides. But Ukraine wanting to join NATO puts NATO at Russia's front door, which is absolutely not a thing that they want. That would be like Canada joining whatever, I forget the name of the group that Russia has. That's their version of NATO, if you will. They have a group, oh boy, I can't remember it. It's like them and Iran and a few other, was it Bosnia? Yeah, there's a few others in there. But like if Canada were to join them, we, the United States, would be absolutely opposed to that because we don't want them at our doorstep. So when you look at it from that perspective, you could see maybe some of the underlying reasons that Russia might be hostile towards Ukraine and be doing some of the things that they are. Not justifying it in any way. Absolutely not. But, you know, they didn't just invade for no reason either. You know, they have something driving them, some need or want. And that does make sense.
Many view this moment as the official declaration of the Cold War. Back in Europe, everyone was living in a post-apocalyptic void brought on by the Second World War.
Everyone needs to chill out.
It was terrible. This is great. The more they suffered, the more likely it is they'll turn to communism. Dude, you're really messed up. What's wrong with you? My father used to punish me severely. America realized what was going on and quickly made a move. Under the Marshall Plan, they sent $12 billion to Western Europe for its economic recovery. The countries of Stalin's Eastern Bloc looked on with envy. Hey, Czechoslovakia, you want to come get some economic aid? Yeah, but I have to check with my mom first. Sorry, America. I can't come.
It's the mental image we never knew that we needed.
Capitalism and communism in Europe.
Stalin in an apron in a rolling pin.
East, that would be a defeat for Stalin. So he set up his own rival economic recovery plan, which he called Comecon, and he also set up Common Forum, which gave him more political control over the Eastern Bloc. Guys. But nowhere did this economic battle reach harder than in the city of Berlin. Caught over 100 miles behind Soviet lines, the city had been divided up between the Allies, and the western segments were still under Western control. East Berliners could travel freely to West Berlin, see the economic prosperity, and think, maybe this communism thing ain't so great after all. Yeah. I'm gonna have fun tonight.
Well, communism I don't think is inherently bad. My personal opinion. Communism is not inherently bad, but it has a very high propensity to encourage corruption and establish a top layer of people that control almost everything within the country and create a vast separation of wealth between the ruling class and the working class. It's happened time and time and time again. If you look back at countries that have been communistic, they usually turn into dictatorships, whether that's thinly veiled or just an outright dictatorship. That's just how they tend to go. Now, there's other forms of government, right? And, you know, there's flaws with them too. There's not a perfect answer. But communism just kind of has repeated itself throughout history.
You're home late. Oh, Stalin, I was just out with my friends. Friends? You stink of capitalism. You're engaging in imperialist debauchery again. I swear, Ivan, I can't keep doing this. Stalin,
I love these guys so much.
So he said, hey, guess what? I'm blockading all of your supply routes to West Berlin. What are you going to do about it? I suppose we'll just fly the supplies in.
Well,
all right, Truman. You in this round. The Berlin airlift was an incredible undertaking and a major success for the Western Allies, and Stalin ended his blockade of West Berlin. His aggressive actions worried the West, but not as much as this did.
Yeah.
The Soviet Union had developed their very own atomic bomb. The USA no longer had a nuclear monopoly. The world now knew that if a major
someone else was gonna do it.
Two superpowers, it would be more destructive than anyone could imagine. So it was comforting when Stalin came out and said that war between the Soviet Union and the West was unlikely. Oh, wait, inevitable. He said it was inevitable. Hey, you know who I haven't checked in on in a while? My good friend China. Whoa! What
Oh
happened
my.
to you? What happened to them was a full-blown civil war that had been going on since 1927. The People's Liberation Army,
Poor
under the
China.
leadership
They've
of
had
Mao
enough.
Zedong, successfully defeated the Republic of China, who fled to Taiwan. The now communist China and the Soviet Union signed a mutual defense treaty. This was
I would love to see a full-blown video on the whole history of China and Taiwan. I think that that's a topic that goes really deep, and there's a lot of things to cover there. I would love that. So I don't know if these guys have one on that, but I would definitely check it out if they did.
fled to Taiwan. The now communist China and the Soviet Union signed a mutual defense treaty. This was terrible news for the West. But wait, there's more. After the Second World War, Korea was divided along the 38th parallel. In the north, the Soviets set up a communist regime.
North and
In
South
the south,
Korea,
America set up an anti-communist regime. Both were led by very sweet-looking old men, but don't let that deceive you. They were both ruthless dictators, and both dreamed of reuniting Korea under their own regime. Now that he had the bomb, Stalin was feeling a little more cocky, and he finally gave Kim permission to attack. The North launched a surprise invasion of the South on June 25th, 1950. With Soviet aid, the North Koreans steamrolled through, taking Seoul in just 3 days and replacing one ruthless dictator with another. The UN were freaking out and quickly
And the
created an
people
emergency
suffer.
force made up of troops from 16 countries to defend the South. The West still held Busan and made landings at Incheon near Seoul. They pushed the North Koreans out of Seoul, replacing the ruthless dictator that had replaced the first ruthless dictator with the same ruthless dictator that had previously been replaced by the new ruthless dictator. And the West then continued all the way up the Korean peninsula. At this point, China was getting worried that the UN may just keep going. The US had sent this guy to lead the operation. After winning the Pacific Theater of
Douglas
World War II,
MacArthur.
General Douglas MacArthur's head was big, and his
I remember
balls were
reading
bigger.
about him.
He reassured President Truman that there was absolutely no way at all that the Chinese would ever get involved. Meanwhile, 500,000 Chinese troops were crossing into Korea. Nuke 'em. No. Nuke 'em. No.
Ugh.
Oh, come on. You're fired. The U.S. considered
Yeah,
the
that would have been a
option, but now that
bad
the
idea.
Soviets also had the bomb. They didn't want to risk all-out global destruction. The communists pushed the West right back almost
Hey,
to the
wait a
exact
minute. Aw, look at that. So I am from the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. That's where I was born. And on a lot of maps, some maps even put out by our own government, they exclude that. That's this little area right here. A lot of maps, you look at like the tax IRS website and everything like that, they will exclude us like we're not part of the family. But Oversimplified got her right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate that.
had the bomb, they didn't want to risk all-out global destruction. The communists pushed the West right back almost to the exact same spot they had all started from, and they ended up in a stalemate, where they remained until both sides finally agreed to work towards a peace settlement in 2018. Back in America, Americans decided they wanted a new president who would be tough on
Oh, these
communism,
guys.
so they elected famed World War II General Eisenhower, who was really hard to draw. It's 1953. Hey, Stalin, how you doing? Oh, he's dead. He had a cerebral hemorrhage, and his reign of terror kinda came back to bite him in the ass, because he had imprisoned all of his best doctors, and those that were left were too terrified to treat him. The new leader,
How do
Nikita
these
Khrushchev,
guys-
called a meeting and said, "Hey,
How
guys,
are these
you know
guys
how
so
Stalin was
good?
imprisoning and murdering us all for
They
doing
keep this
basically
so
nothing?"
entertaining.
Yeah, he was kind of a jerk. I'm really not sure how this is news to you. Khrushchev went on a campaign of de-Stalinization. Statues of Stalin were taken down, Stalingrad was renamed, and Khrushchev announced that he wanted the Soviet people to be happy and would allow greater freedom in the Soviet Union. So how did that work out? Well, an uprising
Great.
in East Germany was brutally suppressed, a revolution in Hungary was brutally suppressed, and demonstrations in Poland were brutally suppressed. Although he did finally allow some mild reforms.
Just
Back in the
another
Soviet Union,
ruthless
he permitted
dictator.
more cultural expression, but then began banning stuff based on his own personal taste. Modern art looks like
Yeah.
a child urinated on a canvas. Banned. Jazz music sounds like the feeling of needing to fart. Banned. Your poetry is really depressing. How could anyone in the Soviet Union be depressed? You're banned.
Poetry's
Khrushchev wanted the Soviet
awesome.
people to be happy, but not like that, or that, or that.
Be
Then people
happy
began
by
enjoying
giving
a
all your
boring
money to
Western
me.
pop culture. Son, remove that disgusting imperialist apparel at once. Shut up, Dad. You can't tell me what to do. Well, would you look at that? Turns out he can tell me what to do. The West had initially liked the cut of Khrushchev's jib, but world events soon soured relations even more. The two sides were spying on each other a whole lot throughout the Cold War. The KGB had spies and informants in nearly every aspect of Western life and government. So much so that whenever the US tried to send spies into the Soviet Union, the KGB were usually ready to arrest them on the spot. Members of the Manhattan Project aided the Soviet Union in acquiring the bomb.
Well, one of the big things too to remember is the United States is a melting pot. So we have, of course, the natives that lived here, the Native Americans, but the hefty majority of the population in the United States are immigrants or families of immigrants that came in from other countries. So it's a little harder to tell who's a spy when, you know, there's a lot of Russians in here, right? There's a lot of Russians and people from that portion of the world that could be related to Russia or be spies of Russia. Whereas in Russia, they, you know, they're not as much of a melting pot. Not saying that everyone in Russia is a native Russian, but if you have someone who's not working their way up the government, you betcha that they're going to be looking at them with an eye of suspicion. So they do have it a little bit easier back in the day, especially to kind of weed out the spies.
Some American officials believed they were on the wrong side. I'll sell you 3 secrets for $5 million. Okay, go ahead. The Allies are digging a tunnel under East Berlin to tap your communications. There's an American agent living at this address in Moscow, and sometimes, when I'm home alone, I like to put on my wife's dresses, sit in the corner, and cry for hours. Very interesting. In America,
I do the same thing without the dresses.
In the McCarthy trials, American values imploded as fear of communism collided with freedom of thought and expression, and communist kind of became a buzzword thrown around to describe anything people didn't like.
It's still a buzzword.
Communist. Your next door neighbor's dog? Communist. When the grocery store cashier asks if you need a bag when you clearly can't carry 10 tubs of baconaise in your hands, communist. But one area in particular where the US had an edge over the Soviet Union was in its espionage technology. In particular, U-2 spy planes flew across Russia carrying out surveillance from the skies.
I don't know. The Soviets were actually the first people to develop and use for espionage purposes a passive RF radio. And this passive RF radio was made of non-magnetic metals, so you couldn't detect it with a metal detector. And it was passively powered, so it didn't need a power source. They would power it with a beam from elsewhere. And it's actually the precursor to modern RFID technology that we use for our badges and our credit cards and everything. It's actually ingenious. They used it on an ambassador way back in the day. And there's a really good video on it by, I think, Vsauce. Or, yeah, I think it was Vsauce. If I remember, I'll try to link it in the description if I can find it again. It's really worth a watch.
There was a nasty incident in 1960, though, when one was shot down and Khrushchev was furious. Who the hell is this? He's a high-altitude weather enthusiast who flew off course. Okay, that sounds plausible. Wait a minute. Why does he have a gun and a poison needle? Because he's a very naughty high-altitude weather enthusiast.
Weather's dangerous.
Concerned, the Soviet Union appeared to be ahead in the space race. Everyone freaked out when Russia launched the world's first satellite, and then they actually sent a man into space. Even worse,
they were the
also
first for
appeared to be a
both of
missile
those.
Gap in the Soviets' favor, and Khrushchev was so confident that he even allowed the U.S. to set up a technology exhibit in Moscow, attended by a certain Vice President Richard Nixon. Check this out. We have color TV. Yes, but we've been to space and can obliterate you with our massive nuclear arsenal. Check out this vegetable peeler. Tensions increased further when both sides upgraded their atomic bombs to hydrogen bombs. And after West Germany was allowed to join NATO in 1955,
Yeah, it got
Khrushchev
scary.
set up the defensive Warsaw Pact, strengthening the military ties between the Soviet Union and its satellite states. In 1960, Americans decided they wanted a new president who would be tough on communism, so they elected John F. Kennedy. The Soviet Union was advancing its technology, but it was also bleeding its coffers dry, and all of the money was going towards the military, not the people. Life under communism was still as hard as ever, and Berlin remained a thorn in the Soviet side. The contrast between the economically prosperous West and the struggling East was clearer day by day, and East Berliners were still able to freely travel to the West.
People
Now,
gonna know.
Many of them were deciding to stay there.
And then they're gonna
Berlin's
talk.
defected to West Germany via West Berlin, causing Eastern factories to lose workers and taking a heavy toll on the economy. Soviet leaders decided this couldn't continue any longer. First, Khrushchev tried this: leave West Berlin, or else. Or else what? Or else I'll be really mad at you. Yeah, no, we're gonna stay. Listen, man, West Berlin is ours, East Berlin is yours. That's just how it is. Kennedy felt pretty good about his show of American resolve. But wait a second. Did
They
you catch that?
drew
Let's replay it.
Kennedy very creepily.
Uh-oh, Kennedy just told Khrushchev that the USA wouldn't interfere in what the Soviets did with their section of Berlin. So Khrushchev came up with a new idea. We're gonna build a wall, and it's gonna be a big, beautiful wall, and it's gonna keep out all the Mexicans. Oh, sorry. It's going to keep in all the Mexicans.
And Mexico is going to
On
pay
August
for
13th,
it.
1961, Berliners woke up to find their city divided into
Oh
two.
my God.
Barbed wire and
I
guards
love these
blocking
guys.
the border between east and west. Over time, a wall was constructed throughout the city. Families were torn apart. Thousands would risk their lives escaping over the wall, and hundreds would die trying.
Yeah, it was
To the despair
horrible.
of Berliners, the West were unable to do anything about it. But the wall did put on full display the failure of the communist system. As Kennedy said, democracy is not perfect, but we have never had to put a wall up to keep our people in.
Yep.
As part of the agreement between the two sides, U.S. diplomats were still allowed to travel to East Berlin. But suddenly, East Berlin crossing guards started giving them the business. And Kennedy was like, nah-uh. In October, the U.S. rolled tanks up to the crossing point at Checkpoint Charlie as a show of strength. The Soviets did the same, and the two were in a standoff. They stayed like that for 16 hours, and the world braced for nuclear Armageddon. Thankfully, though, Kennedy called Khrushchev directly and was like, hey man, this is getting way too hot. How about you back your tanks up by an inch and we'll do the same? Sounds good. Okay, how about you back your tanks up by another inch and we'll follow suit? Alright, hey, you want to do another inch? And they both very slowly inched away from the apocalypse. Phew, let's hope that's the biggest crisis of my presidency. It wasn't.
Of course. Of course. Of course they go there. Wow. I am just so amazed by how entertaining these guys keep this, because let's be honest, history, it's not the most entertaining topic to study, right? It really isn't. But these guys keep you engaged. I did not lose focus for a second during that. Obviously, it's very oversimplified. I know it's not a deep dive. But you know what? It got me really interested. I want to know more. I'm excited for part 2. It's hard to get people excited about history sometimes. So anyway, I can't wait to watch it. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you like this, subscribe. It really helps me out. And I hope that you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.